People who wax others for a living. What's the worst horror story you have of a client? My nail teacher told me this one. A very large lady would ask for a Brazilian wax, which includes the butt crack. She already had strong body odor, and when my teacher waxed the butt crack, the wax strip was caked in crap. She just about threw up on the client. I was a hairstylist and we really only ever did facial waxing and offered to clients as an upsell. A regular client of mine was traumatized by a brow waxing experience with a stylist that was not myself years prior, and declined. Well, the stylist went to wax her brows and dropped a giant clumper of wax on her lashes. Then proceeded to take a long time to remove the wax, I think like an hour, with only water and no oil residue remover that would have made the wax side off instantly. My eyelashes just retracted into my eyelids reading this. Most stories have to do with bad hygiene, some with clients' attitudes or actions, and some will just be plain old problems getting the hair off. I haven't had a really bad one in a while, or maybe I just am not fazed by it anymore. A favorite of mine was the girl who came in for a Brazilian and was shaking from nervousness before we even started. I'll spare you the details, but it took over an hour to finish the service. Usually takes 15-30 minutes. 45 is the most it should ever take. And at some point she had a full-on anxiety attack. I was being as gentle as I could considering I was ripping hair out of her body, and after every pull she sat up, cried loudly, and then dropped back onto the bed. She got off the bed still half naked and started pacing back and forth, loudly sobbing and hyperventilating. I was trying my best to keep her calm, but honestly, it was all in her head. Getting your hair ripped out always hurts, but her hair should have been an easy service. She let herself panic and the fear got to her. After she left, I sat in the break room, took a deep breath in, and starting sobbing LOL. I was so glad to be done with it. She was sweet otherwise. No smell, easy hair to work with, but god, that was the most stressful service of my life. She actually came back a few more times after that and we finished in 20 minutes. No more incidents. As much as she struggled to get through it, I want everyone to know that no one was telling her she had to. I asked if she wanted to stop and she said she was pushing herself to do new things despite her high anxiety. No significant other pulling the strings, and I certainly didn't force her to go through with it. Some women do it for other people. Men, I would even say most women, do it for themselves. My first Brazilian, I was so nervous. I have anxiety and pushed through it without complaints, but I definitely left sweat marks on the table. After the next time I was fine. I'm like this with all new services of any kind really, and I'm happy she felt comfortable with you to keep going back after. Client story. Went to a waxing studio I had never been to before and got a Brazilian done. The lady did this with bee wax, I think, which you just put on the skin. It dries quickly and you pull it off without a cloth paper. You have to apply it at a certain thickness for it to work. The lady begins and at first, everything is going well. She works her way to the more private areas, but I can tell she works pretty hard. I have strong hair and this was after 2-3 months of growing. When she gets to the labia, the problems begin. She can't seem to rip the hair off. Her solution is to apply more wax on top, but still no budging. More wax is applied and she starts slightly spreading it out too. So I am now covered in warm, thick wax almost everywhere, which feels a little like wearing a small harness. I get a little scared and just hope that she knows what she's doing. She however chooses this moment to inform me that it's possible to rip off skin as well and to kind of scold me for having thick hair. Incredible people skills. So comforting. Luckily, she somehow managed to get it off. Never going back there though. Which feels a little like wearing a small harness. This is a fantastic description. Story my aunt told me. 2 or 3 layers of skin came off with the hair. It was on a guy's genitals and there was a lot of blood and yelling. Stop. My sister was an esthetician and refused to do lace lips and buttholes because of issues with people's hygiene and how gross it could be. Her co-workers gladly did them though. Better tippers. In general, when you're waxing their butthole, and don't hurt them too bad lol. Sometimes people come in and they're super sweaty, and it's hard for the wax to stick to sweaty skin. So, usually, they just pat some baby powder on them and problem solved. One day a younger woman came in, she was super sweaty, so the esthetician decides to haul out the baby powder, dab some on and turn to get the pot of wax to do the job. I should mention the woman getting the wax was on all fours on the table, as they usually are. So, esthetician turns to get the wax, woman on the table lets out a fart. Just a little slip, but still, baby powder went everywhere, all over the table, all over the esthetician, and was hanging in the air. I asked if the girl was embarrassed, and my sister said that apparently she just played it off like she didn't drop a bomb, but the baby powder evidence told the truth. Plus, it reeked, but the esthetician was a total pro and didn't even faze her. That would have been the end of my waxing career, lol. I literally got waxed today. I'm reading through all of these hoping I'm not the one being talked about. Carmen, if you're reading this, I hope I'm not one of your horror stories. Like I said, Sarah, crapping on the bed while getting waxed is perfectly normal. No need to worry about it. Not a waxer, but one time my sister called me crying after an eyebrow wax because the wax was too hot and they ended up burning her skin and ripping it off. She had to walk around for a couple weeks with the red burns around her eyebrows. It was the first time she ever had her eyes waxed before too, so didn't know what to expect. Needless to say, she never got them waxed again after that. She started to get them threaded. When I was in middle school, my mom got a home waxing kit for eyebrows and wanted to test it on me. Mistake number 1 was letting get anywhere near my face with hot wax. Mistake number 2 was standing up while she waxed, because a bit of wax dropped down onto my eyelash and waxed my eye shut. I lost a few eyelashes that day. It was very painful. First time getting waxed, I was maybe 16. And I was about to leave for a few weeks to be a summer camp counselor. I had my legs, armpit, and bikini line done. I wasn't too worried going into the appointment because I knew I had a high pain tolerance. The room I was in was hot to start, and after we started the process I started sweating and the paper lining was sticking to me. It was incredibly painful, but I didn't know any better, so I decided to just tough it out. Afterwards I bled out of every pore she waxed. I got blood on all the clothing I was wearing. My legs looked like tiny minefields. I came out of the back to my mom in the waiting room and I was holding back tears, it hurt so bad. Needless to say, I never went back, and the next few weeks at camp was spent nursing the scabs and sensitive skin. I'm not the esthetician. I was the person who was being waxed. I have a reaction to extreme pain where I laugh. The esthetician said it was better than swearing or yelling at her, but I can only imagine the conversation she had with her co-workers after I left. I have this same problem. Whenever I get anxious about something happening to me, or I'm in pain, I just laugh. The first time I gave blood, the lady kept looking at me like I was crazy, even after I explained myself. Not me, but the stylist who waxes me. She told me she had a girl come in with a tampon. Normally, most of stylists are okay with that, but they will ask you to hold it to one side or the other while they're doing the waxing. This girl let go of the tampon string before the stylist ripped off the wax and the tampon ended up smack against the wall. Due to the impact of the tampon, blood was splattered in multiple places on the wall. Apparently they had to repaint it. She says they both laughed like crazy about it and, to her credit, the girl offered to pay for the wall to be repainted. So I didn't know my skin was insanely sensitive. I went and got the whole kit and capital. Brazilian, the lady even did the inside of my butt cheeks a bit. Well, turns out I'm more sensitive than I thought I was, and the severe itching and enormous rash that followed was catastrophic. I was so itchy and so miserable. I got it done because I had an Indiana Jones trip coming up and my boyfriend said that'd be so hot. It was not hot. I was wrecked. I did not enjoy the dunes. It felt like someone rubbed poison ivy all over my vag and butt and inner thighs. No matter how much aloe vera, cocoa butter and ointments I costed it with, it was a nightmare for like a week before I started seeing results. So the week was spent with horrible tossing and turning sleep, followed by me waking trying to itch it. Going to the bathroom sucked. Hot showers sucked, cold showers sucked, everything about it sucked. One of the 100 creams I used gave me a UT. It was a nightmare inside a nightmare. Oh, not related, but you just taught me it's kit and capital and not kit and capital. Not a waxer, but an eyelash technician. One time I had a client come in with crabs in her eyelashes, which was obviously the worst thing I've ever seen. Frequently people come in for fills and haven't bothered to clean their eyes for 3 weeks thinking it will make the extensions stay on longer, resulting in a nice layer of yellow crusties all along the lash line. A waxer once told me that she had accidentally waxed a girl's tampon straight out of her pee. The string must have got caught in the wax. Neither of them said anything for the next 30 minutes. First comment on Reddit ever BTW. Glad it was this. That sounds like the world's worst magic trick. A regular client of mine that I had been seeing for about half a year came in for her Brazilian wax. Everything is going fine as normal, and then I get to the labia, and as I'm spreading the wax I notice a golf ball sized lump deep under her skin. I remove the wax and investigate a bit. Not any grown hair, nothing surface related. I let her know and she tells me she'll see her doctor ASAP. I never saw her again. Still wonder if it's something serious. On a funnier note, had a woman come in for a Brazilian who clearly hadn't done any maintenance in a long time. I remove the towel that's covering her ladder bits for privacy while we enter and leave the room, and I actually out loud said ho. He had to have been almost 4 inches long. Not my most professional moment. Client laughed though. This was waxing myself, not others, but once I tripped while carrying a hot jar of wax. I was naked as I was about to wax my muff and just got a new sofa. In the split second of tripping for some mystifying reason I decided that instead of letting the wax get on the new sofa I'd put my body under the spillage. I ended up with scalding hot wax stuck to my stomach area. It burned me, and as I have a pretty deep belly button, took a while to cool. I couldn't move in this period as I didn't want to spill the wax more. When it had cooled I had to spend 2 hours slowly detaching the wax from my burned skin and tiny stomach hairs that it had welded to. I was half laughing at my stupidity and half crying at the pain. My mum called during and couldn't stop laughing at me. I got my eyebrows waxed after being off Accutane for like a month. Thought it would be fine. She ripped my skin off but for some reason kept going. I had red skin all along my eyebrows. She didn't even do a good job shaping them. LOL. I had my eyebrows waxed at a very posh hotel spa. She ripped a strip of skin off my eyelid and wouldn't even admit that it had happened. And neither would her boss. It was pretty obvious to everyone else who saw it though. No idea how she managed to do that. I'm a hairstylist, but an esthetician friend of mine said she kept a small container of Vicks VapoRub in her apron pocket and would smear a bit on her upper lip before doing certain people's Brazilians because of the smell. Ah, the good old coroner trick. I wax my own eyebrows mustache at home. Recently, I decided on a whim I wanted to wax off the tail of my eyebrow entirely to make drawing them on easier. I put the wax on, pressed the waxing cloth to it, ripped, and nothing came off. The wax would not stick to the cloth like it usually does. I had to pull the wax off with my fingers, little by little, with each hair of my eyebrow being pulled out individually. Don't be me. Something I learned to do is fill in your brows like you normally would and then pluck the brows that aren't filled in, if that makes my sense. It makes it so much easier and faster to do your brows. Client story. Not as dreadful or gross as the others here, but I tried a new place that promised to do full Hollywoods in 15 minutes. I walked about 10 minutes to the salon on a freezing cold evening. The girl slathers on the hot wax all over my front garden and starts to pick off the wax. Only she can't. She laughs nervously and says it's probably because my skin is ice cold still. After 10 minutes of humming to herself nervously, she calls in the manager, who calls in another beautician. I now have 3 women all working together on my lower region while my legs are akimbo and I'm panicking thinking I'll be the laughing stock of the A&E. Eventually the manager just fricking goes for it without warning and rips it off in one piece. I scream ooh frick off and everyone is suddenly feeling a mix of relief and upset. They are devastated how terribly it went. I'm devastated because the original girl is still upset. I assure them they didn't rip off my labia and henceforth would not be leaving a bad review on Google. We laugh about it afterwards though. They gave me a complimentary treatment which went well and I've been a regular since. I went to beauty school for massage therapy and was talking to an aesthetics student during lunch one day. She said a guy had come in for a back wax looking like a shag carpet. Being that there was so much hair in surface area, it took quite a while. He one-upped every conversation with his Dungeons and Dragons game, and even after the service was over, kept talking her to death about it, and didn't tip. He also moved and got a quarter-size drop of wax on his arm and just left it there the whole time. Not his job to get the wax off himself though, lol. I don't do it for a living, but I wax myself during swimsuit season. I had forgotten to put baby powder down and accidentally put too much wax on my bikini line. I decided to pull it off anyway. It took a few fabric strips and I ended up having to pull extremely hard. I broke some capillaries and ended up bruising extremely bad. Hurt like a bee to wear underwear for a week. I was getting a wax one time. I think it was the first time I did it, and I was so nervous and I said something totally stupid as the very nice lady was waxing my butthole, and she laughs and goes, "OMG, you're so cute," rips wax strip off. I literally just got waxed for the first time yesterday. What weird timing. The woman who did the service was obviously rushing the job to get to her next client, and giving me a sales pitch the whole time about how I had to book that day to come in 4 weeks. Because if I didn't go every 4 weeks it was pointless to come in at all, because of how the hair grows and blah blah blah. Also, it was super important that I buy this teeny tiny tube of cream for $20, about the size of a travel lotion, or else I would get infected and disgusting. Please don't give me a freaking high pressure sales pitch when you are touching my lady bits. Oh, and right before she started, with the butt, she told me very harshly that if I flinched or tensed up she would immediately stop the service and she would literally have to go get scissors and cut the wax open. That's what you want to hear during your first time being waxed. Well, she's kind of right about the 4-week thing. I always scheduled my Brazilians after my appointment for 4 weeks to the day, and I bought any recommended products, but I'm prone to razor burn so I was not taking any chances, lol. During school I trained to be a beautician. The salon that I trained at did full body waxing. I was the youngest one there, so the ladies at the salon would give me the clients that they didn't want. One day, a overweight lady came in and wanted a Brazilian wax. She had a foul scent, so they gave the lady to me. I offered her wet wipes and asked if she wanted to go to the bathroom before I start. When I started, the smell worsened. I also had to ask one of the salon ladies to lift her rolls to get to her lady area. Her lady area had crusted crap in her lady area hair. I was still new to waxing, so I ended up throwing up on overweight lady. The overweight lady ended rolling off the table and the firefighters had to be called because no one could lift her up. The salon ladies offered the overweight lady a free service and refused to keep training me. After that I quit my dream of being a beautician and started studying hospitality. I was a hairstylist before becoming an esthetician full-time, and I had to do a man's Brazilian. I'm about 90% sure he did pure lewd modeling or something BC of his body and how exact and picky he was. He requested me to wax his shaft and balls, like pull it tight and rip the crap off. Then he asked me to sit there and tweeze any hairs I missed. I don't wax below the neck anymore. I've also had a handful of women come in for Brazilians with toilet paper or other organic matter in their pubes and butt crack hair. My waxing lady told me she had a client who tried to do a Brazilian at home. The client did a small bit then changed her mind. She hopped in a hot bath to wash off the wax and got stuck in the tub. The client then called to flatmates who couldn't pull her out. Her flatmates then called the ambulance, who called the fire service, who cut part of the bath out. Then the ambulance took her to hospital where they removed the bath piece and wax with solvents. Welp, can you imagine? Waxing story. I'm a male. High school girlfriend said I had too much pubic hair. Let her wax me as she wanted to be a professional stylist one day. She didn't do it correctly and ended up, well, yanking. Not an esthetician, but a client. I got a Brazilian wax once and accidentally leaked a tiny bit of semen during the wax. I was horrified, and it wasn't even my first time. I wasn't aroused or anything and it just happened. I apologized profusely and she said it was fine and that she'd give me a towel and step out the room to clean up. It was made even worse because I had just minutes before asked her about her horror stories. Now I'm hoping I'm not one of hers. Once had a lady who was rather large, always had awful hygiene and smelled as though she hadn't showered for days. She had those red scabby lines in the folds of her fat, and when she lifted on her skin to stretch for the wax removal, a rotten stench would be released from the crevice. She had eczema and very dry, scaly skin around her bikini line and anus. Sort of reminded me of lizard skin. I used to dread the days she was booked in with me. I was doing a Brazilian wax for her BTW. I'm no professional, but I tried an at-home bikini wax by myself and I covered my lady bits in wax, and when I started to rip I decided I couldn't handle the pain. I obviously didn't do it right. Ended up walking around with those on me all day and eventually soaked in a bath to get them off. Don't know why I didn't think about doing this at the time of ripping. LOL. Last week a friend told me this one. She attended this girl who was a bit shady about her last waxing shaving. She asked the girl how long ago it had been or if she had recently been to another spa. According to the story, the girl's parts looked tanned badly, so after some questioning and talking she decided to wax the girl. First strip and the labia skin came off. She went pale and immediately saw what was going on. The client had recently had a laser treatment, a bad one. The girl finally accepted and spilled the truth. At the same time she adamantly asked for a proper waxing because she had an upcoming event. My friend sent her off with a burning sensation and a warning. Not a waxer, but I've worked in a salon before. Just so everyone is aware, if you are stinky, or exceptionally hairy, or have gross grooming habits, the aestheticians will talk about you once you leave. One of the clients who came in didn't wipe her bum properly, reportedly, and the girls all referred to her as Stinky Bum. They thought she was a pretty crappy client. Not me, but my niece, who was about 19 at the time, right out of high school, was working at a nail salon waxing place. She usually just had to do regular waxes on women, but this particular day was an elderly man around his 70s and asked for a wax. They go to the back waxing room, and this guy gets butt naked. She was horrified. I guess his balls were hanging between the bottom of his thighs. I have a friend who was a waxer and she had a client come in for a Brazilian. During the service she noticed something hard and bright yellow in the lady's vag. She asked about it because she was afraid of hurting her. The lady nonchalantly said they were Duplo blocks, and that she put things from around the house up there for her husband to randomly find, and he loved it. Friend said it was absolutely bizarre. Not a story but a SAR for those who use face creams with retinol. Be careful if you get your eyebrows waxed. There's a good chance you may lose a layer of skin. Made that mistake and thought it was odd the lady didn't show me my brows afterwards. She was likely worried I'd be horrified and blame her. Poor girl. It was my fault and I accept full responsibility. I have PCOS. This means I can wax mine and anyone's butt crack or anywhere else with ruthless efficiency. My funniest story was when I waxed myself but the cleaning fluid leaked or disappeared. I was 21, in my apartment with a girlfriend and my guy. We couldn't get the extra wax off. This was back in the day. Products sucked, so I am cyclic about herbs, chemicals, and products. For whatever reason I said Tiger's Balm will get it off. Poof, my legs were smooth and tingly and we went to the party smelling like Tiger Balm. Reminds me of a sunburn and Noxema and then party. From a friend. This guy comes in with like 3 of his friends, one of them reeking of weed. The guy wanted to get his chest, a sweater basically, waxed and his friend were there for the lols. So she gets him set up for the waxing and put on the wax. The guy starts crying after the first strip. He taps out after another 5 or 6 strips while yelling and swearing at her through the pain. His friend were just dying from laughter. Anyway, he leaves with a mostly unwaxed chest bleeding through his shirt. Turns out he was a virgin doing it to impress girls or something. Dude was like 40. Hot topic: employees of Reddit. What are your horror stories? My high school GF worked there way back in the day. She said the worst part of the day was having to collect merchandise from the fitting rooms and cleaning the fitting rooms. Apparently, all sorts of nasty women would go in there and try on the panties, not use a liner and just generally leave them all crusty and bad smelling. They would also leave pads and tampons all over. She said they had to throw away so much merchandise that was left in that condition. I feel like this may be a problem anywhere they sell clothes, but then again Hot Topic may attract a different type of customer, so it might have happened more often. I worked in the soft-lined section of Target for a couple years. My manager found a swimsuit with a used tampon in it in the fitting room. I remember people getting very angry when we told them they couldn't try on the underwear. I always wondered why they would want to try on underwear that someone else had potentially tried on. I worked at a Hot Topic in 1999 to 2000. We used to get a fair amount of strippers that came in because we were the only place around that sold see-through vinyl bikini tops and 6-inch stack boots and crap like that. Anyway, our fitting room was basically a hole cut in a wall with a mirror and a thick curtain that had to be pulled close just right. This one day, a stripper came in to try on a bunch of stuff and really didn't even bother with the curtain. Apparently, she was so used to people seeing her naked that it wasn't a big deal for her. Granted, this was a weekday morning and she and her boyfriend, manager, bodyguard or whatever were the only people in the store besides my manager and me. At one point she just stopped using the fitting room altogether and was just using the full-length mirror on the door to the stockroom office. My manager and I really had no idea what to do, because at this point she's got about $1,500 to $2,000 worth of merchandise that she's probably buying. And this lady is good for both business and morale. She didn't seem to be worried at the prospect of anyone seeing her, and the way our store was set up was really narrow and long, and the display fixtures were tall and bulky. It was very difficult to see into and out of the store unless you were standing in the center aisle. It made loss prevention a nightmare, but really allowed this lady to let her freak flag fly. She finally puts her clothes on at the cash wrap as she's checking out. My manager gave me so much crap after that because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't even make eye contact with the customer while I rang her up. That was the largest transaction I ever rang up in my time there, and paid for it with the largest wad of cash I'd ever seen in my life up to that point. TLDR. A stripper came in on a slow day and treated the store like her own private dressing room. Honestly, you probably made her day, Mayo. Stripper clothes are expensive AF apparently. I worked at Hot Topic about 8 years ago. For the most part, the gig was the best part-time job I ever had. Great managers, great co-workers, great customers. Only 2 instances stand out in my mind. 1. This was around when Twilight was big. Middle-aged women would come in and ask where the Edward Jacob merch was and then just start fawning over them in the most uncomfortable way. 2. My actual interview. It was a group interview. One of the questions was something about either a difficult customer service moment or something. This one guy, obvious HT scene type, proudly talks about the time he worked at a bookstore and sucker punched a female customer in the face for calling his style weird, freaky something. I never saw that guy again, so I don't think he got the job. He undoubtedly went straight to corporate. I worked for 2 years at my local Hot Topic and the worst stories both involved the fitting room. Our fitting room used to be a self-service room in the back of the store with a red curtain in front of it. An employee noticed 4 feet in the room and opened it to find 2 people having sex in it and had to clean up the remnants. A second incident came when a smell wafted from the same room. It was later discovered that someone had actually taken a dump in the room when they went in to try on clothes. We ended up fitted the room with a galvanized piece of chain and a master lock to keep the curtain open. Luckily, shortly thereafter, we got a full store overhaul that put in actual fitting rooms. My current boss was a former store manager at a Hot Topic and he told me that he caught one of his employees stealing a shirt he had stuffed into a Sonic cup. From then on out everyone had to check bags and beverages for merchandise. I work at a UPS warehouse and there's a story that goes around about a guy who smuggled diamonds out by putting it in his water and saying it was crushed ice. So now they make us dump out our drinks before we leave. A petite friend is currently a manager at one and her issue is always a customer that become too often repeat customer obsessed with her or another female employee. Currently it's a guy that swears they would have everything in common because he likes all the things in the store too, as if she curated it, and now has to stay 500 feet from the store. Thursday is actually my last day with Hot Topic after 4 years. In general the company is amazing to its employees and I've met some incredible people, but boy do I have stories. 1. I once found a condom on our anime section. It was open and filled with something. 2. We had a girl who I am positive had some mental issue because she would get into the fitting room and try to lure anyone in there to help her, then try and seduce them. She was actually pretty but young and filled to the brim with crazy. 3. Alice Cooper came into the store once, totally unannounced, and brought a teacup pig. Absolutely wonderful person. Gave our metalhead associate tickets to his show and this dude about lost it. 4. Also met Machine Gun Kelly, Mayday Parade, We the Kings, and Max Green of Escape the Fate. MGK and the vocalist for WTK were buttholes. 5. We had a guy get thrown against the front gate on the morning of a Funko Pop release. In general, the job has taught me some pop collectors are grads a buttholes. 6. Had a woman ask me if she should go back to stripping after her C-section, then lifted her shirt to show me the scar and her T. 7. We found out there was a group of malrats who wrote fanfiction about the staff at our store. I never got to see any and I'm glad for that. You know, it doesn't really surprise me that MGK is in butthole. Not a horror story but a ridiculous short one. I had a woman come in with her sleeping infant and screamed at me to turn off the music while she strolled around the store. I mean, if your baby is sleeping and you want them to continue, maybe don't come to browse the store that you can hear music blasting from the other side of the mall. IDK, what's to tell you, haha. I've been in a few HTs though where the music was so freaking loud it was actually hurting my ears. It made me feel old. Maybe that's the gatekeeper. If it's too loud, you're too old to shop here. I was working on the sales floor and this guy, at least in his 30s and pretty high, starts making sexual comments to me about this 15-ish girl that was checking out. I asked him to leave and nothing more came of it, but it was chilling. Also had a co-worker get fired because they were selling weed out of the back room. She'd sneak it into their bag while they were checking out. Also had a different, off-duty, co-worker come in hammered late one night to tell everyone working how great we were. That was actually kinda nice. Besides that, it was a lot of kicking out vaping teenagers and letting the quiet girls from my school try on skimpy Harley Quinn bikinis in the dressing room. Worked there for 13 years. So much weird, but that's just retail in general. Caught a guy masturbating into women's shoes in the dressing room. People had sex in there more often than you'd be comfortable with. I worked for them when Columbine happened. We carried a brand of clothing back then called Serial Killer, which featured pop culture pics, references, and some edgy saying, like a pic of Bruce Lee that said revenge or something like that. The morning after Columbine happened, we got an email to pull all the Serial Killer clothing line off the sales floor, as well as every trench coat in the store. By the end of the day I'd already had to call security twice due to people showing up at the store and harassing me for supporting those psychos and training the next ones. Then the TV networks showed up and pretty much camped the front of our store, harassing every customer as they walked in out, asking them why this dark lifestyle attracted them. The mall ended up having security just hang out in front of our store and walking our employees to their cars for a week afterward. Honestly, it was the best job I ever had. The company was really supportive at the corporate level. I still have friends that work there. They pretty much left me alone so long as I made sales. So I had carte blanche to set up my stores the way I wanted, even if it didn't look like the planned merchandising setups they sent out. I had direct access with every debt. So if I felt my stores couldn't sell something they sent us, they'd let me transfer it somewhere else, and vice versa. Get more bestsellers in. Honestly, if it wasn't for the working every weekend and closing a lot stuff, I would have continued working there. Honestly, it was the best job I ever had. The company was really supportive at the corporate level. That's rare in retail. I've experienced it, but, as you said, the hours are terrible. Still, my best job was a retail job. Former employee. I worked a whole 3 months in summer, so all the kids were out and about. I was stocking Disney merchandise and I couldn't help but notice a kid underneath one of our clearance racks. I heard some strange noise coming from there too, so I crouch under and look at the kid. He had a button, needle and all, in his mouth. I asked him where his parents were, and before I knew it he swallowed the pin and ran out of the store. I couldn't leave and go search for the child, so I'll let security know about the button kid. Never knew what happened after that. I can't seem to forget button kid though. Spent almost 5 years working at one in the early 2000s. Being in the Midwest, we had a ton of juggalos, but they were actually pretty nice people in general. I had a group of kids ask what I would do if they set some clothes on fire and flicked a lighter multiple times. We mostly got weirdos who wanted to bang in the dressing room or lifted up their shirts to ask me what gauge their nipple ring is. We had this one girl who came in weekly and I don't think she was all there. She would sit at the listening station for way too long and then leave. One day she sat down and put the headphones on. She had a plastic bag with her filled with empty glass bottles and peaches. Yes, the fruit. We noticed it was leaking onto the floor but just let her do her thing. She put the headphones back and looked at her leaking bag. She had a mildly disappointed look on her face but immediately looked at her watch and yelled, "I'm going to miss my bus." She ran out of the store and up to her trash can outside the store. She held the bag up high and yelled, "Peaches, meet your fate," threw the bag in the trash, and sprinted off. That job was weird. She held the bag up high and yelled, "Peaches, meet your fate." As much as I'd like to judge the girl in your story for this, it sounds exactly like a thought that my internal filter would prevent me from saying out loud. Former employee of a couple years in high school. I loved that job. The biggest horror story that sticks out in my mind was this guy that would always come in with his kids. He was a huge Ike fan, and from the looks of it, he let his kids, both boys, they were I'd guess maybe 7 and 8 at the time, listen as well. They always had hatchet man stuff on and pretty bitchin' haircuts. They always misbehaved, just running around the store screaming, sometimes crashing into stuff, and the dad gave no fricks. He was often pretty rude to us in the store about not having specific merch or being out of stuff in his size. He was a large guy. I had and still have no business in what that guy does with his kids, but I always felt a little bad that there was a good chance they would end up in a bad way. Other than that reoccurring instance, for the most part our store was really fun. Sounds like a legit Juggalo story. Had a friend who was into them. I busted his balls constantly for it. I worked for Hot Topic for about 7 years. My store was apparently the Juggalo store of the district, and I think the state. Working for that company as long as I did, I was pretty used to ignoring people's crappy taste, but the Juggalos were different. This is in Central Florida, so it's on average about 90 degrees most days and always humid as heck. These kids were always very overweight, wearing a massive black Ike tee. Those ridiculous 30-pound black trip pants with huge pockets and all their hardware, chains and straps hanging from them, and they were drenched in sweat. Their hygiene was almost always awful. They always seemed to show whenever a new Ike shirt or collectible would arrive, and would smell up the store and pay in wadded up, sweat-soaked money. It was just all around unpleasant. The smell would linger for a bit after they left. It was not pleasant. Wadded up, sweat-soaked money. No thanks. This is my time to shine. I was helping a lady at the Disney section. She was pretty particular about the things she wanted and was asking if they looked okay enough for her. Being my first job, I was really enthusiastic about being a salesperson and I really do love Disney. So I was hyping her up the best I could and we're laughing together, getting along really well. Then she says, "Yeah, I wanted to get all the same things my boyfriend's baby mama has. Is that weird?" Literally did not know how to respond. I said it wasn't and cashed her out quick. I want to look just like her. Cue maniacal laughing. Cue black and red dramatic lighting. Cue Trixie Mattel shrinking down behind the service counter. This was my first job in my college town, and generally, I absolutely loved it. You're treated like some super cool mini celebrity by all the little mall rats. The management was generally great to their employees, and the work wasn't too hard in my small, low volume store. However, there was the issue of Valentine's Day. That year they were promoting all these different corsets and lingerie, as well as the Get in Our Pants campaign for the skinny jeans. Management wanted the employees to try and show the corsets not just as lingerie, but as fashion items, maybe paired with the skinny jeans, increase sales and all. So there I am, Valentine's Day, in a black corset and tight black skinny jeans and boots. Way more sexy than 18-year-old me with a still developing body was comfortable with. In comes creepy McCreeper, a 50+ something dude who says he wants to buy something for his wife, but wants some help picking it out. Not once did his eyes look at my face. The entire time I'm helping him, He's staring at my butt or chest and making weird comments about how I remind him of his daughter, or being uncomfortably comfortable telling me explicit details about his wife's body. He then asks me to try it on and show him, so he could see how it would look on his wife. Luckily, shy 18-year-old me awkwardly laughed it off and got him past the register and out of the store. I loved that job, but Jesus, did it draw some widows. Maybe not so much horror, but just terribly annoying cringy. 1. I was wearing a Hellblazer shirt that had a cover of the new 52 revamp on it. I had 2 neckbeards come up and start trying to keep me on if I was really a fan of Hellblazer John Constantine. It included the actual questions of, well, what's your favorite arc, who is your favorite writer artist? 2. Halloween is coming up. It's the Halloween season after Suicide Squad came out, so we have both versions of the Joker's outfits, the other from The Dark Knight. Both versions were unreasonably expensive. In total for the Dark Knight costume, if I remember correctly, was about $200 altogether. Because you had to buy the coat, the undershirt, the pants, etc. The fabric of the costume was just a little bit better quality than the $50 version you get at any Halloween setup store. We had a guy come in about 30 minutes before we closed for the night and wanted to try on the Dark Knight version of the Joker's outfit. The costume was hanging up on the tallest rack, so it required me getting a pole and pulling down each one because the size he needed was a large and each component of the costume. He tried it on, enjoyed it, and wanted to buy it. I went ahead to go ring him up, and then when he saw the price of it he started flipping out. He started complaining that he could find this costume in anywhere else that he wanted at a cheaper price. He wanted to know if there's any coupons or if I could give him my employee discount. I told him there's no way I could do that. He starts flipping out and says he needs his costume tomorrow and he doesn't have that money now. He took me about 45 minutes after closing to finally leave. He did not buy the costume. Even before Suicide Squad came out, working Halloween around Hot Topic was always cringy with all the Joker and Harley Quinn people. I don't understand people that try things on with the intention to buy without checking the price and the audacity he had to ask for your employee discount. LOL wow. Finally, one of these where I have an actual personal story. I worked at one for about a year. You would see a lot of cringy stuff just because of the base it attracts, but nothing terrible horrible usually, besides one time. I was working a Saturday afternoon shift. It was about 3:30 PM and the store wasn't busy at all. There were only 2 weeboo looking guys in their 20s in the store. Then, a group of 4 teens walked in giggling and looking suspicious. They go up to the weeboos and start singing the Nine Cat song. Nine. Me and my co-worker are like, what the frick? One of the weeboos gets aggressive and is like, step the frick back. Step the frick back. He then fricking grabs a chain wallet and starts swinging it at them. I call security and my co-worker is just screaming hey 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 trying to stop it. One of the kids calls the weeboos fat asses as he's still trying to hit them with the wallet, and responds to their insult by calling them daddy's CM stain B asses. By now 3 security guards come in and break it up, while the silent weeboo is saying the kids started it. Both parties are escorted out different exits while we give a report on what happened. Never saw any of them again. Weebs vs. Scene kids. A fight I'd pay to see. My sister worked at one for a little while. One day 2 grown men were fighting over a pop. It's like a collectible figure. Like a legit fight. She said it was like the comic book guy from The Simpsons fighting another comic book guy from The Simpsons. My sister called mall security and noped the heck out of their way. Neither one of them got the pop. My sister had to put all the stuff back that they knocked over. I used to work at Funko. You should see how people act in the customer service side of things. It's especially bad because customers can only email us about their crap. Worked at one seasonally for about 6 years through high school and college. Absolutely loved working there. We had a customer come in who claimed he was a vampire. He dressed like an extra from Interview with the Vampire on a tight budget and went out of his way to insist that he was truly a vampire. He would occasionally corner employees to berate them about this. It happened to me while I was helping him find a new pair of boots. He cornered me by the changing rooms, told me all about the women he enthralls, and spoke in metaphors at me for about 15 minutes. I tried to be as polite as possible and feigned interest, but eventually he must have noticed how I wasn't falling prey to his glamour, so he switched to complaining about how he has 2 different sized feet and finding footwear is hard. Outside of customers, we once had an absolute idiot as a manager. Dude would come in and fall asleep on the tables in the stock room, or spend hours at a time in the bathroom and have us tell anyone looking for him that he's on a conference call. He'd also occasionally try to find ways to get MOS'd merch out to his car. Once, back when we had a CD changer for the in-store music, he brought in a bunch of CDs from his car to play. One was Blink-182's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. None of the albums he brought in were censored, which we didn't actually think about until the intro to the bonus track Fricka Dog came on. The store was pretty full. We both panicked, and I ended up jumping over the counter to get to the CD changer in time to hit skip. My toe caught the counter on my way over, throwing me off balance and causing me to drill my other foot toes first into the floor. Still skipped before anyone knew what was playing, though. Well, I worked at the PacSun 2 stores down but knew the HT people pretty well as they were the only ones who also smoked cigarettes. If either were out of smokes we could get one from the other. Hung out with the manager a few times at his place to smoke out, etc. He was super into Coheed and Cambria and we'd jam out to that. Had a wife and kid who were super nice and cooked dinner for me when I was there. End up moving and on a trip back home, I stop in to see if anyone I knew was still there. Ask about manager dude and the person's face just drops. Turns out dude was in prison for fricking a 14-year-old. I got excited because I saw Coheed and then I kept reading. That's super gross. Glad this dude is in jail. Spelling. I didn't work there very long, but I remember on my second day of the job a lady came in looking for something to buy her daughter. Told me she was a fan of Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, that kind of stuff. So I walked around with her for maybe an hour showing her all sorts of things she might like. This was back when Hot Topic was more music oriented in the early 2000s. We picked out a few really awesome things I thought she might like, and then the mom spotted a Marilyn Manson miniskirt. After hearing how her daughter dressed and what kind of music she listened to for upwards of an hour, I tried to tell the mom that her daughter probably wouldn't like that skirt, but she insisted and ended up getting only the skirt. It was my first retail job. Something inside me died a little that day. Mom was embarrassed to be shopping for herself. I worked in a Hot Topic in a small town where it was really controversial for the store to be moving in. I worked there about 6 months after it opened and we saw a lot of older folks eyeing us and their store as they walked by. One time this high school girl was in buying a band tee and as she was checking out her grandma came in yelling something about devil worship, then proceeded to fall to the floor speaking in tongues. Security was called. I was there for 4 years, so I'll have to think about this for a bit. First story that comes to mind was my first Halloween. Corporate sent out calendars that were only on the shelf for maybe 3 hours. Each month was a different serial killer. It had a picture, stats and sayings from each one. For instance, one month, June I believe, was Ed Gein. It had his kill count listed, and then basic bullet point facts about him. This was the first and only time I ever saw corporate had us field destroy merchandise. To this day I wish I had kept a copy. I worked here seasonally in high school, around 2006, and honestly the cringiest part of the job were my co-workers constantly telling me I'm not punk rock enough. I would wear band tees and jeans and had a nose ring. Sorry, I didn't want to shave half my head and dye it orange for a mall job. They would literally jeer at me to go work at Hollister, literally being the people they claimed to hate. This was why I never had the balls to apply. Didn't work there, but I can bet your butt a Hot Topic employee cringed and laughed at me. When I was 10ish, I really loved to write. I was also going through that edgy phase. I think Avril Lavigne was getting big right around then. I was looking around the store, not really knowing what half the stuff was. They always had awesome bumper stickers, and I picked one up that said Inkaholic, because I like to write, you know, with ink. And I told the cashier as much when he asked me what the sticker meant. That was one of those things that I completely forgot about until several years later when it randomly popped in my head, and I realized how wrong I was. I hope he got a good laugh over me. A 10-year-old buying an Inkaholic bumper sticker because they like to write, you know, with ink, is one of the most adorable things I've read in a long time. GameStop employees of Reddit, what are some of your horror stories? 4 come to mind. A woman comes in to trade in an old Xbox 360 in a box. I open the box and the smell hits me. Rat droppings, grime, cockroaches and all have spent time in this thing. Luckily my manager noticed and we were able to decline the trade. Spent 5 minutes disinfecting the counter before I helped the next customer. One time I was trading in a PS4 I think. We were chatting while I was wiping his hard drive and commenting on all his achievements. Sometime during this conversation he got nostalgic and changed his mind, but not before I had already deleted all his data. Felt terrible. One homeless looking guy comes in during one of the few times I'm alone in the store. He was dragging around a trash bag, and I was doing my best to keep him in eyesight as he was all kinds of sketchy. He managed to stuff an Xbox 360 in the bag and walk out, but I ran out and asked him to give it back, which he did, saying please don't call the cops. I did. The last one kinda shook me. This woman comes in with a gaggle of kids, maybe 4. They were all terrors, running around to different parts of the store, yelling, grabbing things and rearranging them, seemingly causing distractions while this woman tried on 3 separate occasions to get behind the counter. They end up buying something, but then I notice under this big box the oldest kid has picked up he'd stuffed his hands full of the little DS games that were on the gobbox section on the counter. There was more here but I've lost some of the details. But it really gave me the impression this was all coordinated by their mother. It's one thing to see adults steal. To see kids who are encouraged to do so, just terribly sad. I was an assistant manager when one of the Madden games came out. 04, maybe? We were doing a big midnight opening for it and everybody was having a great time waiting for the game, which we were picking up from another store about 30 miles away. Around 11 o'clock, after people had been waiting for 2 hours after the mall closed, I got a phone call. The game wasn't coming. I almost broke down, sitting behind the register, dreading the thought of telling everybody that they just wasted their time. To make matters worse, another store within walking distance of us got their games. I just wanted to die that night. I am so grateful that our customers took it well and didn't get too angry. Had a couple come in to return a Sesame Street video game and a controller. They had a receipt from over a year ago. The game was scratched to heck, and the controller was full of dried soda. They said it didn't work anymore. Shocker. And were furious when I wouldn't give them their money back. Like standing there screaming at me. I was the manager so I had no one else there to back me up. It was crazy. Their kid was bawling. The lady was swearing like a syphilitic sailor and the husband couldn't finish a sentence. Pretty sure they were both super high too. So that was fun. When the PS2 came out I was assistant manager and my manager would sell them out of the back room at a markup. Such a snake. I took the demo Xbox home with a copy of Halo before the system launched one night and had a 4-player all-night party. One of our other local stores had someone dig through the outside wall and steal everything out of their back room. Also when you get done alphabetizing the Wii games and notice your hands are covered in mystery sticky stuff from all of the filthy children handling the cases. That was pretty gross. One time a woman screamed at me because her kid was tearing open a toy before paying for it and I kindly told him to wait a little bit. She seemed on the fence on whether she wanted to buy the toy or not for her kid. So you know I wasn't glad that her kid was already ripping it open. She then proceeded to scream at me for being really awful with kids, a horrible person, bad at my job, etc. Also she wanted to complain to the manager if I ever talked to her kid like that again. She then angrily paid and walked out of the store. Also people tinkering modding their console and then trying to return it because it doesn't work anymore and angrily insisting on having it bought that way in GameStop. Oh my god, the people who broke their consoles trying to mod. I had one woman start throwing crap at me when I refused to take her return. She also called 911 because she believed the police would make me take it back. It did get a cop out there, but he cited her for misuse of emergency services. Worked part-time at GameStop while I was in college. The best story I love to tell is the mom and son story. 40ish mom and 7-10ish boy come into the store, in a large strip mall with lots of stores. Don't even look at merchandise. Come up to the counter and ask to let the kid use the bathroom. Clarified she's not there to buy anything but has spent thousands of dollars in our store previously. We politely tell her we can't let customers use our bathroom because it's in the back of the store with lots of high-priced merchandise. That's the policy. We have cameras and corporate reviews the footage. Another story I have, where I was wrongfully terminated, substantiates that one. Additionally, what we don't tell her is that all the used game consoles that people sell back to us were stored in the bathroom. There was 1 month prior to Christmas I had to do some impressive yoga to get to the toilet. I'm sure those consoles were a hazmat, but I digress. But, not to be unsympathetic to this kid's plight, we tell the mom that the pizza place next door lets people use their bathroom if they buy something, and the cheapest thing is a $1 soda bottle of water. She starts flipping out on us and spewing expletives, telling us she's paid our salaries 10 times over and that we're going to heck. Yada yada yada. Then, no joke, tells her son to just go. Kid actually unzips and pees all over the carpet in front of my register. Then they left. I've never been so grossed out and dumbfounded. Had to close up for the day and half the next day while GameStop paid to have our carpets sanitized. Resulted in a loss of pay for the weekend. Wonder what happened to that kid. He's gotta be in his 20s by now. TLDR. Mom let her fully potty trained son urinate on the carpet in front of the registers when we didn't allow him to use the employee bathroom in our store when there was a perfectly good bathroom for him to use in the pizza restaurant next door. Note to self, don't buy used systems from GameStop as they may have spent more time in the bathroom than I have. Former employee. 2 wonderful stories. 1. Older lady brings in a bag. She looks like an addict and she wants to sell her Wii. I put my hand in the bag and it's soaking wet. Cat pee. She was furious I wouldn't take it. From that day forward, made every customer take all trades out of bags themselves. 2. My first store was long and I had a kid and mom in back. Mom wasn't paying attention at all. 8-year-old walking around. Gets really quiet. Then mom rushes the kid out of the store. Go back there and he took a crap on the floor. Watch the tape. Mom finds him squatting. Lets him finish then takes him out. Kid shat on the floor in my store too. But we had no cams in the store and they were long gone before we noticed. A gentleman comes in to buy one of our old 360 bundles. Used, the old system that required the HD. He brings it back a few days later and complains that it doesn't work. We start our normal troubleshooting methods in store. We couldn't figure anything out. So I do a swap. Take his old system in as defective. Then sell him a replacement bundle. I go through and try to wipe the system so we can ship it back to the warehouse. Cockroaches start crawling out of the system instead. I freak out. Throw the system in one of our giant shopping bags. Throw that in a box. Tape it shut. And throw that in another bag. My manager tells me to just shrink it out, meaning we take the loss, and destroy it in the back. I take it out to the parking lot and have to throw it around to destroy it. These cockroaches freaking scatter like marbles on a floor. I'm dancing around the parking lot on my tiptoes to avoid the flood. It was awful. Second story. One of my regulars was a skunk farmer. I will say no more. ETA. Okay. Skunk farmer. I worked at a store that bordered 2 states. In state A, where the store was located, we were in a nicer area. We were extremely close to state B's rural community. State B had its own store an hour away from ours, but we were only 15 minutes from the state line. It was easier for state B residents to come to us rather than go to their own store. Mr. Skunk Farmer raised skunks. I don't know why or how, but every time I'd see him, about twice a month, he'd show me some photos of the babies, or of their new pens, or of whatever shenanigans he was trying out on the farm. I remember he wore overalls that he had his wife embroider a skunk onto the front pocket or something. I worked at GameStop for 3.5 years. We all have seen some strange things. I promise you all that. Get the frick back here and say more about the skunk farmer. Not an employee, but I was waiting in line to buy a game, and a guy came in with his 8ish YO child I assumed was his son, and pointed the kid to the Nintendo section as he went over to PlayStation. I was daydreaming, off in my own world, and it took me a second to realize a moment later that I was hearing water splashing. I turned around to see the kid projectile vomiting all over the floor in the Nintendo games. The employee at the counter, the lady in front of me and I all just watch this child empty his guts onto the floor before the father comes up to the son. "You okay, bud?" "Yeah, alright, let's get out of here." And without a word or even looking at anyone else, the two leave the store. Once gone, the three of us exchange wild looks, and the employee tells us it's his first day running the store on his own, and he doesn't have any cleaning supplies or know what to do. Poor guy. Parents, please don't let your kids throw up in GameStop. Apparently, when I was about 6 I threw up all over some lady's fur coat in a department store cashier's line. Worked at GS a long time ago, but I'll never forget this one. One night a guy brought in a really dusty and dirty GameCube wanting cash, of course. I asked him if it worked and he said he didn't know because he hadn't played it in a long time. I told him that we have to check every console, and when I turned it on and opened the lip, about 100 roaches came running out all over the counter. I worked in a store where theft was a very common occurrence, but this one dude, he nabbed one of the cheap controllers off the wall from the back of the store, puts it in his backpack, then comes over to the counter. He reaches across the counter, opens a drawer and steals a brand new game out of the drawer, takes it away from the register, opens it, waits in line, trades the game in for 25 bucks. Then he asks me to look for something in one of the bottom drawers and he steals back the game he just traded in a second time. After that he immediately left the store before I could notice he was gone. I gotta give him credit, he had some slick balls, so many other sketchy things too, but this one I just had to laugh at. I got two stories. Quick one is a guy who would come in all the time to ask about by obscure Vita dating sims and asking inappropriate questions like if the next Dragon Age, at this time would have been Inquisition, was going to finally have sex scenes in it. Next one is New Year's Day. Miserable, I'm working already. It's super early and first customer of the day, of the whole year, is this like 7 foot tall guy who comes in asking for AV cables for a PS4 cause the one he just bought didn't have one. We immediately tell him the PS4 only uses HDMI and so it wouldn't have AV cables. Even confirming with him you mean those red, yellow and white cables, he starts getting mad and asks again for the cables, which we again tell him don't exist. Maybe there's an adapter or something, but I've never seen one and we don't have them here regardless. Maybe check Best Buy. Guy immediately starts screaming, "You racist hem, get me this cable. I'm homeless. I just bought this thing for my grandkids. You're all racist white devil suckers." Thankfully I froze in fear and confusion and my boss took over and just scooted the guy out the door. Heck of a way to start the year. Origins had sex scenes, in a way. I used to be the ASM of a GameStop, but nothing really out of the ordinary happened there. Just a lot of lingerers. When I was the manager of a local game store though, there was definitely a lot of wild stories. The one that sticks out the most is this old dude we called Psycho Sexy who would come in every Monday morning, try to sell me or whoever was working bootleg PDVDs. He would tell us they were good for busting fat butt nuts too and that he'd sell them to us super cheap. Every Monday he'd come in, open up his duffel bag of bootleg P, get refused, then leave and come back the following Monday. This went on for almost 3 years. I was hired to help open a new store, a store where the manager was male, and everyone he hired, female. He was definitely trying to cultivate a hot GameStop kind of situation. Word got around, and we had people coming in to visit ours when they had other stores much closer to where they lived. They didn't really buy anything, they kind of just lurked around for hours at a time, chatting the staff up. There were days when they'd wait for us to close up. That was kind of scary. I was eventually let go for not being friendly enough, which was apparently about 3 months before the manager had a total screaming meltdown during store hours, declared himself High Archangel, threw some crap at a customer and was later picked up by an ambulance. So I guess my horror story is the whole dang job. At this local supermarket I sometimes visit. Literally all of the cashiers are tall blonde women. I suspect that's not a coincidence either. My first job was at GameStop, early 2000s. I stayed for about 4 years from when I was 17-21. Started as a part-timer and ended up as a shift supervisor. Then boyfriend, later husband, now ex-husband, was our store manager for a while. The point is I have seen some crap. My favorite one. It is a weekday afternoon, so we're slow and short-staffed. It's just the two of us. My boyfriend and I, and maybe a customer or two. Someone is playing the Guitar Hero demo. Someone is browsing the wall. The door jingles. and in walks a guy with a huge backpack. I give the customary greeting. Hey, welcome in, let us know if you need anything. And he doesn't acknowledge or respond. I shrug to my boyfriend. Go back to cleaning discs or stripping cases or whatever. The guy looks around for a few minutes and we think nothing of it. Finally he comes up to my boyfriend and gestures for the stack of post-its he's using to label games we're putting in the disc buffing machine. Boyfriend obliges. Guy says nothing, just writes on the post-it. He puts it on the counter in full view of both of us. And in all capital letters is the following message. I have gun. Give money. Boyfriend and I turn sheet white and realize we are being robbed and this guy has a gun in his giant backpack. We are teenagers with no manager and no silent alarm under the desk and we are freaking terrified. The guy is already putting down the backpack and unzipping it. The other customers are totally unaware and off doing their own thing and we are going to get murdered in a GameStop at 1 PM on a Tuesday over the $100 we have in our tiny butt till in the safe neither of us have the combo for. He reaches in the backpack and withdraws a light gun for a Sega Dreamcast. Turns out this guy is deaf and wants to sell us a freaking light gun. TLDR. A deaf guy came in to sell us a toy gun and decided the best way to communicate that was to write on a post-it that he had a gun and wanted money. One of my other favorites was when the PlayStation 1 got re-released with a little pop-up screen and someone came in to trade their original one. I took it in the back to test it out and quickly realized that it was completely, inexplicably, utterly full of maple syrup. I once had a lady and her teenage son come in to trade in several DVDs and games they had just stolen from the Walmart behind the strip mall where our store was. Walmart employee calls me to ask if they are in my store and says the cops are on the way, so stall or do what you can to keep them there. I said sure. I told them the cash versus store credit value of their items without mentioning that I can't even take them because they are still wrapped in the cellophane. I walk them around the store and talk about which games are the best value for the money, etc. The cops show up and ask them to step outside and I just smile and go back behind the counter. They followed the police out and one officer comes back a minute later to get the merchandise. Last I heard about it, not a horror story but definitely weird. Then there was this wealthy couple who had 3 kids and each kid had a Wii, a PS3, and an Xbox 360. They would pre-order every major game that came out for each system, always the deluxe edition. They spent a ton of money in our store, and they were crazy, so abusive to every employee. They cussed at us and called us stupid. They would ask for things they knew they couldn't have and then throw a fit. They would scour their receipts for anything that could be a mistake and make you explain it to them over and over. I went to work at a different company and they came into my store there and got in line for my favorite cashier. I immediately called the manager over when it was their turn to check out, explained how I knew then and that there was a 99% chance they would make the cashier cry. He went over and just as he got there they were beginning to raise their voices about some supposed mistake. Luckily that manager is super good at handling people and got them out without letting them get a word in edgewise. I practically had PTSD from dealing with them. I think they got off on abusing people together. They would sometimes be laughing as they did it. If they found a legitimate mistake in anything, their faces would just light up. Truly evil people. Retail employees actually do get PTSD from this nonsense. Former GS employee here. Worked in a store on the edge of a super sketchy part of Akron, Ohio. Back in the PS2 era, a guy brought in a box of trades. There were 3 games: Leisure Suit Larry, Playboy, The Mansion, The Guy Game. The rest of the box was nothing but P on VHS. He was politely asked to leave. He asked us why. My co-worker's response had me keeling over. Because there's jizz all over your crap. He left. This was 2007 or so. GameStop had a used game return policy. 7 days no questions asked. Full refund. People would abuse this constantly, like a rental service. We knew it, and we were able to flag people who did it too often and decline them the returns. Manager policy, not company policy. Then there was this 1B. Old lady, gaggle of grandkids. Seemed so sweet. Was very nice to us while in the store, asking for help, recommendations, etc. Bought them a PS2 and a freaking gigantic stack of games, like had to be 20-25 at least. Her total came out over $400. I rang her out, handed her the multiple bags of stuff, and said to the kid something along the lines of, "Wow, you guys are lucky to have such a great grandma. This many games will last you months." The grandma chuckled and said, "Oh, they're only in town for the week. You guys have that 7-day return policy. I'll see you in 6 days." And then they realized just how crappy of an idea that was. Today, a customer brings in probably the grossest PlayStation 4 I've ever seen. I think, oh no, please don't have roaches. I hold it on end and tap it against the floor and nothing falls out. Nor is there a rustling of things moving. No telltale signs. I take it in. My co-worker decides he needs to find out why it is so dirty before cleaning it and opens it up. Inside is the world's first deluxe roach hotel. Managed to keep the horde contained in the box the console was going in. That console is gone now. Why are people gross? I got scolded by management for helping a woman for 30 minutes. She bought 12 games and was looking for good recommendations for her son who was on the spectrum. I found every game on her list and a few more to surprise him. Those surprise games were Okami and Katamari Damacy. She was overjoyed that her son was going to have lots of good games to play. Why were they mad over such a large sale? Oh, because they weren't freaking used. Frick that store. That woman wanted to make sure her son was happy and I was tasked to do so. I know I did a good job and you guys can close shop. Never was an employee, but on the night Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, I was waiting in line and this kid rode up in the parking lot and starting bragging about how he got the first copy and held his copy out the window. After about 10-15 seconds of bragging and holding it outside the window, another kid ran up from behind the car, yanked the copy from his hand, and ran into the woods behind the GameStop. They never found the kid who took it, and the kid in the car started crying immediately. Never dangle anything from car that you don't plan to lose. Items, limbs, people. Not a horror story, but it always makes me laugh when I think about it. I worked at a big box store similar to Best Buy when the Wii U first came out. After months of Wii U's being impossible to find, we finally had some stock in. I was helping another customer on a busy day when a guy stopped me to ask the price on the Wii U. Customer: "How much is the Wii U console?" Me: "It's 400 Canadian dollars plus tax." Customer: "Yeah, that's too much money. Can you do any better on the price?" Me: "Yeah, for sure. For you I can give it to you for $399.99. Customer: "That's much better. I'll take 2. That's way cool." It went from the $400s to the $300s just by asking. I'm going to start shopping at your store. I had a guy call me a terrorist. I am Middle Eastern. We had a buy 2 get 1 free sale on pre-owned games. He wanted to buy the 2 cheaper games and get the expensive 1 free. When informed that's not how it works, he flipped out. We had to call security in the mall we were in to get him to leave. He called corporate and corporate told us he was documented, so any negative reviews on the next few weeks would be flagged. My manager stood up for me that day. I miss that guy. We also had a fire breakout in the back room. Got rid of a lot of old inventory. Happened on Halloween. We were closed for a few days to clean and stuff. I used a fire extinguisher that day. First time ever. I worked at GameStop as a RASM and SM for 4-ish years. I have so many stories of creepy, scary and rude customers. Some highlights. I once got asked out on a date at the register. I'm young and naive and awkward, and I kind of stop in my tracks and tell him that I'm working and I can't answer that. I work another 4 hours or so and close by myself, and he was waiting in the parking lot for me to leave. I had a family that would bring their son in every Saturday. They explained to me that he had severe autism, and he was non-verbal. No problem, except they would stand in a corner and text or whatever while he'd knock over stands, rip things from walls, and even run behind the counter and try to bite you. I had to get permission to ban them from the store, but I was tired of trying to not get bit. Edit. For some clarification, just because a customer was awkward does not mean to me that they were creepy. This guy was a special case, hence why I wrote about it. I met friends I will always love when they were customers. I met people I worked with in the gaming industry in other capacities. I met my ex, etc. I am about to get my degree to specifically work and study children with disabilities. I have no problem being kind and patient with anyone, including children. but I don't want to be bit by a kid that I have no way to protect myself or my employees from. If y'all could stop sending me hate mail about being a nervous 19-year-old kid with a 40-year-old man leaning on her car at night, that would be awesome. Also, the other people's stories about seeing disgusting stuff is true. I saw more pee on PS Vitas than I want to admit. I found drugs in game cases, and mostly I just saw a ton of systems filled with cockroaches. Day in the life, I guess. Barbers, stylists, hairdressers of Reddit. Has anyone ever sat in your chair with a head so nasty that you didn't even want to touch them? What is your horror story? One of the first shops I worked in, there were two individuals who would regularly come in for cuts. Both of them were physically so dirty it changed their skin tone, and they absolutely reeked of cat pee. Being close to them made my eyes water, and it was extremely difficult to breathe as the smell of ammonia was just plain overwhelming. We never turned them away, and we were always as polite as we could be. But frick if those haircuts didn't feel like they lasted 3 hours. I've always heard that M users often give off an ammonia cat pee smell. Long time ago, but I had to wash and cut a teenager that hadn't washed his hair in what looked like months. Salon policy was to wash after a men's cut and the smell was awful. After his cut, I tried to wet his hair in the shampoo bowl and the water just ran off his hair because of all the oil buildup. I had seen a lot during my years as a stylist, but that was the worst experience. Imagining water not being able to penetrate oily hair is the grossest thing I've heard of in this thread. Older ladies that came in for a wash and a water bath that had a helmet of hairspray of 4 weeks old was pretty normal. Had one client that had really bad psoriasis and no hairdresser wanted to help him. He was also very ashamed, so we made the deal that he could come in after closing time. It was really bad and most of the equipment, combs, clips, were disposed instead of disinfected. As someone with this condition, thank you for not turning him away. It's not contagious at all, but can freak the heck out of people. I've been lucky that when mine has been pretty bad on my scalp, my hairdressers were still okay with working with me, but I think the longer hair helps mask the problem a bit. My husband is a barber. One day he had a guy come in with dreads, wanting them all shaved off. He parted his dreads, looked at his scalp and noticed it was green. He touched it and saw it ripple. Asked the guy when he'd last washed his hair. He replied, about 3 years ago. My husband realized the guy's whole scalp was covered in a layer of pus. Sent him straight to A&E to have it drained and treated with antibiotics. Bye. My sister is a hairstylist and got scabies once from a kid. Apparently the mom knew the kid had it too. Just didn't tell my sister until they were leaving. Yuck. Horror story of mine. I used to babysit for the neighborhood. One day I got these kids that were scratching at their heads after taking them outside, but because they were playing in the sandbox together, 13 and 8, I figured that there was sand in their hair and reminded them to shower when they got home. Go to get my hair done the next day. Hair was down to my mid-back and I asked for a short bob just below my ears. Halfway through, the hairdresser stops and loudly announces to everyone in the shop, people I knew were there, that she could not continue to cut my hair because I had lice. I was so embarrassed. You could have at least taken me to the side and explained instead of making me feel dirty. If I had known, I would have dealt with it, especially if someone was gonna be dealing with my hair. I still blush when I think back on it. Sound like the time a bank teller shouted at me. I couldn't hear her through the thick glass and tiny holes drilled for her voice that I had bounced to check. The entire lobby heard her because she not only turned on her little microphone, but shouted into it as well. My dad was a hairdresser before he passed. When I was young, I had really bad psoriasis on my scalp. My dad has been the only one to ever cut my hair. Passed 3 months ago, and I can't bring myself to get my hair cut, even though it's desperately needed, in my 25 years on this planet. And I can remember a few times sitting in his chair where he was literally combing and cutting out large chunks of dead, flaky skin. It was the most embarrassed I have ever been in front of him, because no matter how many topical remedies I tried, I couldn't get it to go away. Eventually grew out of the psoriasis, but I still hold on to this moment as one of my favorite moments, where the love my dad had for me really shone through. My mother was a hairdresser in the 1960s for Vidalsasson. During the time of the beehive, customers wouldn't wash their hair for weeks. They'd just keep spraying it to keep it in place as it was such a complicated do. This meant a lot of fleas, lice, and on one occasion cockroaches that had to be washed out. For some reason this never bothered my mother all that much, but hearing about it made sure I never, ever wanted any kind of hands-on customer service job. I used to work as a receptionist at a high-end salon. One day, a lady called and asked if we had anyone who specialized in cutting curly hair. I matched her up with someone, asked the standard questions, and made the appointment, which turned out to be for her granddaughter. When the family showed up, the mother and grandmother were white, and the granddaughter was African American. They obviously didn't know, and didn't bother to learn, how to take care of the girl's hair, because it was in a giant, waist-length ponytail that was completely matted. She also had a bit of a developmental disability, and they claimed she would not wash her hair herself. I could smell her as soon as she walked in, but when the stylist got her hair wet at the shampoo bowl, the smell quickly permeated the entire salon. It was like a punch to the gut. The hairstylist had to keep coming up front for fresh air. She said giant flakes, sheets of dandruff and buildup were basically crusted to the girl's scalp and throughout her hair. The matted ponytail was the worst of it. What should have been a simple 45-minute service ended up taking over 4 hours. The girl looked great when she was done. I felt terrible for her because it was pretty obvious that her mom and grandma had no intention of keeping her hair maintained. I got the impression that they basically only took her for a haircut when things got completely out of control. I was horrified that they apparently weren't even bothering to wash her hair at home. They bought a bunch of products that the stylist recommended, but ended up returning everything a day or two later. That poor child. My hairdresser says she had one lady who brought her kid in for haircuts and the mom never brushed the kid's hair ever, so my hairdresser had to spend upwards of 45 minutes trying to comb the knots out of a squirming kid's hair. I think she eventually fired the client because it wasn't worth the cost of a kid's haircut to spend the better part of an hour just on combing. We had that happen in a salon that I worked in. Because of the way that the mom treated the little girl, we ended up calling CPS. I left that job before I ever saw any resolution, though. I think about that little girl all the time. Way back in the day, my mom was a hairdresser. She told me a story once of this guy coming in who had bird shit all over the top back of his head. Guess he got pooped on and didn't notice or something. I had a young man come in with his mother. He was about 8 years old and had tight curly hair. His mother asked me to shave down to a 0.00000, that is the shortest you can go with clippers. I said sure. It was my last cut of the day and I was eager to go home. I start the service and notice barely 1/3 RD in that he had a lice infestation under the tight curly hair. I mean, these guys were huge. Probably why his mother needed me to shave it off. So, I discontinued the service and spent the next 3 hours disinfecting everything in sight. The boy's mother called the barbershop later to complain because I wouldn't finish shaving her son's hair. We tried to explain that it was illegal for us to continue the service as it might spread lice to others and recommended a specialty shop that could take care of this for them, but she demanded that it was because we were racist. That was fun. I once had to turn a lady away after she booked in for hair extension removal. The micro-bonded type your stylist should tell you last 3 months maximum. Nobody told this lady. They had been in for 7 months. My boss booked her in with me. The extensions weren't done in my salon. I took one look at it and told her I couldn't help. There was a chunk of hair about 6 inches wide that was matted with bits of hair glue, not what we use, poking out. To me, her options were shave it or cut it almost to the scalp. Some hairdressers shouldn't be allowed. Bit of a different horror story, but my stylist once had a woman with hair past her butt who wanted to donate everything to Locks of Love. Everything. This woman with hair down nearly to her thighs says she wants a pixie cut and is donating everything else. After checking multiple times to see that she was positive she wanted a pixie and not a short bob or anything, the stylist starts cutting. The woman sobbed the entire time, like shoulder shuddering sobs in the dressing chair with her sad little haircut cape on. Stylist kept asking if it was okay, but the woman was determined to help people with cancer and told her to keep going and to ignore her tears. My stylist said it was the most awkward experience of her life. Other customers kept coming in and probably assumed she was maiming this poor woman. Side story, when you donate hair to Locks or Love, the hair doesn't go to cancer patients, it goes to make high-end wigs that are sold, and the proceeds of the sale go to buy wigs for cancer patients. Not that this is bad, just the fact. I'm not a stylist for humans, but I do groom dogs, and I have seen some things that make me want to never give these dogs back to their owners. My worst experience was when I had someone bring in their 2-year-old Shih Tzu. She was down as a mini groom. That's where we only trim the face, feet, and private areas, so I'm thinking this will be an easy groom. Wrong. This woman walked in with her dog wrapped in a towel because she doesn't want to touch him, and I can see why. The dog is a mess. The dog's hair is one solid mat including his face, and there is a deep giant hole in his coat where the poop has exploded through his hair, meaning he has been pooping into his own hair for so long the buildup finally busted a hole through his hair. So I have to shave him before he can get any kind of bath, so I find a spot I can break through and start shaving. This is very bad on my tools, by the way. Once I finally release this dog from his mat prison, which came off almost in one solid piece, he ends up having so many sores on his skin. He was shaking his head so much he was starting to cause hematomas on his ears. His butthole was infected and he is infested with fleas. I'm so upset at this point. I feel so terrible for this poor dog, but all I can do is bathe him, get rid of the fleas, and inform the owner that he needs to go to the vet. Whoa, I didn't even think about pet grooming. I bet that can get crazy. I feel bad every time I take my dog to the groomer and there's a small mat somewhere. When I was an assistant at my first salon right out of school, we had classes every Wednesday night. Well, one week I couldn't find a model in time, so my mentor had someone she knew come in and be my model. So the model comes in, seems perfectly normal. She sits in my chair, I start the consultation and start looking through her hair to see what I'd need to do. Apparently this young lady had not washed her hair in what I'm assuming was weeks, because her hair was so greasy that every time I touched her hair my hand came back drenched in grease. And the smell. Oh man, I'll never forget that smell. It was the worst thing I've ever had the displeasure of working with. I asked my mentor if I could shampoo her before starting and was told that I couldn't. So here I am working on this girl who almost literally has grease dripping from her hair. I must have washed my hands 10 times that night. Needless to say, I had my own model for every class after that one. I have other stories from my time teaching as well. Lots of lice and people leaving the school bleeding. TL. DR. Couldn't get a model for class. Was supplied one with an oil slick on her head. My cousin is a hairdresser. One time a woman brought in her special needs son. He had some hygiene issues and his ears were covered in blackheads. While all the other hairdressers recoiled in horror, my cousin gritted her teeth and gave that kid the best haircut she could. I really respected my cousin after that. That poor kid. I wonder if his mom just ignored it or if she couldn't do anything about it because of his condition. Not a hairdresser or my story, but when my sister was young, elementary school aged, she didn't like to brush her thick hair and it was always a source of grief. My mom took her to get her hair cut, and after the hairdresser tried to brush her hair for a minute, she said that sister needed to brush it herself. So my sister had to sit in the lobby with a brush until the tangles were gone. It was some pretty effective social shaming. LOL. I hated brushing my hair as a kid, but it never got that bad. If it had, I'm pretty sure my mother would have just cut it all off herself. My wife once worked at a store that hosted princess parties for young girls, normally around ages of 4-10. They would all put on gowns, get their hair styled and have a tea party, whatever. As my wife started styling one girl's hair, the host queen of the party, naturally, she noticed something on the end of her comb. Lice. Head infested with tons of crawling white lice. Being the awesome professional my wife is, she quietly stopped combing, washed her hands and threw the comb away. She then pulled the girl's mother aside to the little girl's chair and quietly informed her of what she had found. The mother apparently wanted this day to be awful for her daughter. She started screaming and rushed to the chair, digging into her daughter's hair. The mother was not quiet about it. She was screaming, "She has lice," over and over, while her daughter started crying in the chair with all her friends gawking at her like a free freak show. This is why therapists make money. Jesus, what sort of monster parent does that to their own child? I had a woman come in one day who had hair halfway down her back. She just wanted a trim. I got her shampooed, into my chair and began combing her hair, and noticed a peculiar smell and what looked a bit like dry scalp, but not quite. I looked a bit closer and the flakes were actually little translucent nits. Lice eggs. I could see tiny black things. Hairdressers are of course not doctors, so we can't diagnose, which means I had to tell this woman that she needed to go see a doctor and I couldn't do her hair, but I couldn't come right out and tell her she had lice. I told her it looked like it might be lice, and she worked with kids so it was a good guess. She was so embarrassed. I had to throw away a really nice cape along with several towels and had to disinfect everywhere she had been. I had some people over about 8 years who had crusty stuff on the scalp and around the ears. They tended to go a while between baths, which you can tell because people develop a funky smell in their hair. The hair gets a distinct aroma. Little kid hair has a similar smell. It takes a lot of washing to get that odor off your hands. You can actually place the cape in a sealed bag for so many days and the lice will die. That way you won't be throwing capes away, because this will happen many more times. I would just toss the combs though if necessary. This was while I was still in school. Dirty looking woman came in needing her hair washed and probably cut too. She had open sores all over her face and neck, which meant she probably had them on her head too. Her hair was completely dreaded into one huge red from how dirty and tangled it was. I was in the middle of putting conditioner on her when she informed me she was HIV positive for over 15 years. Nope. Not a hairdresser, but I think I might have been the nasty client. I desperately needed a haircut, but I also had a cyst on my head that was fairly large. My hairdresser was very quiet for once, and that's never a good sign with a hairdresser. In my defense, I tried to get a doctor to fix the cyst, but she wasn't able to dig all of it out of my scalp, and it grew back. And maybe a week or two after the haircut, I popped the cyst like the nastiest pimple ever known to creation. Seriously, the amount of stuff that came out put me into a bit of shock, and my hands looked like I'd been messing with a gunshot wound. On the bright side, popping the cyst managed to blow the whole thing out. It never regrew, and my hairdresser was happy with me again. When I was in school, I had a regular client who was around 90 years old and pretty sassy. She had a growth on her head that was at least 4 inches long and 2 inches wide. It was irregular and black and red and is what I would draw if you asked me to draw melanoma. She refused to accept advice about going to the doctor for it. I gave her a perm a couple of times and just tried to pretend it wasn't there, but I can still see it 10 years later. I used to be a dog groomer and I had a golden doodle come in matted to crap and the entire strip down the hair literally was all one piece. I could have theoretically worn it if I wanted to. Owner got mad because I went shorter than what she wanted. Fun times. Customary, not a hairdresser, but I just have to share this story. When I was a broke butt student, I was in a place like Walmart getting my hair cut. An old lady comes in and sits in the chair beside me. She says to the hairdresser, "Oh yes, and by the way, I have a large boil on the back of my neck." Hairdresser says okay. Old lady says yes. "So can you squeeze it?" The hairdresser started looking around for tweezers or something and I looked firmly at my lap and tried not to barf. The answer to anybody dating "can you squeeze this" should always be no. Just no. I am a hairstylist and have plenty of stories about clients, but this was a story told to me by a former co-worker who was also a stylist. We will call her Jen. Well, when Jen first got out of school, she also did nails. One day she has a manicure come into her salon and was getting ready to soak her nails. Takes the ladies and notices dried dirt or something lodged under nails. Jen tells her to go wash her hands before they start and the woman makes a comment how she had her period. That gunky crap under nails was dried period blood. This happened in hair school and I wouldn't say it was entirely my fault, but I guess that is for you to decide. So I was toward the end of my time in school and I had been out on the floor taking clients for a couple months. A woman came in with very long, very dry looking hair and told me she wanted a perm. At this point I was already beginning to get nervous, but I figure I might have time to talk her out of it. For anyone who doesn't know, perms can be really harsh on your hair. Not a lot of stylists I know like to perform them because they take a long time to wrap. They stink. They can turn frizzy really easily, and they are super hard on the client's hair. I can't tell you how many girls have brought in pictures of Taylor Swift and expected me to give them a perm that will come out like her natural curls or her iron curls. So this woman is sitting in my chair with her hair probably measuring 3+ feet long and she wants a perm. So I do a quick integrity test on her hair to see how strong it is and if it can handle the chemicals. I'm already predicting that her hair is too weak for the solution, but I check anyway. Lo and behold, her hair breaks off in my hand. At this point I have my instructor come over and help me talk to this lady about the possible risks of her hair falling out or breaking off or becoming super frizzy, and this lady is having none of it. So per school procedure we have her sign a waiver saying that we made her aware of all the potential risks and that it may not come out how she wants it and we are not liable and we're just students blah blah blah. She happily signs the waiver and sits back. This whole time I'm freaking out because, waiver or not, I did not want to be the one responsible for fricking up her hair. I ended up going to the director of the school because I didn't feel comfortable performing the service and she told me to do it anyway or go home and lose hours. So I walked back to the chair and spent 2 hours wrapping a freaking piggyback perm on this lady, and when I finally get her to the shampoo bowl, as predicted, her hair begins to break and fall out. My instructor and I worked for another hour and a half rinsing and styling her hair, and when we were done it was horrific. To say it looked like crap would be a massive understatement. I was on the brink of tears and my instructor was stressed and exhausted, but this lady was as happy as can be. She paid, gave me a big tip, and disappeared into the night. TLDR. In hair school I am forced by my instructor to perform a perm on a client with long, brittle hair and she comes out looking like an ugly poodle. Haha, not me, and technically not hair, but my best friend went to cosmetology school and said the majority of pedicure practice came from old men who would come in to get their toenails cut. Because they were too old to do it, couldn't reach them, whatever. One girl is cutting some old man's toenails and one went flying right into her mouth. I think I just mentally barfed. Nurse here, but had a patient once with not so much dreadlocks as a single dread cap. I thought neurosurgery had occurred because she was admitted wearing an oar hat. It was to hide the mess beneath. The facility hairdresser had to give her a crew cut. I did a stint of barbering school last year before my wife and I split. She is a hairstylist and I only did it to appease her. Anyway, I had some nasty haircuts during my time there. The most notable was this group of guys that came in and they were all family, I think, and older, maybe 40s, but looked like man children. So I get this one guy who is in sweats and looks like he hasn't showered in a good 2 weeks. He sits down and I could instantly smell him. It was putrid. And it wasn't like dirty homeless bad, it was like super BO greasy stank. I cape him up and he clearly has no idea what he wants, so we go back and forth and he wants a trim or whatever, as he had like maybe 5 inches of hair. I wet his hair and I kid you not, it was one of the nastiest smells of my entire life. For those of you who don't know, hair smells when wet, and if you have dirty hair it's amplified a lot. It was foul. So at this point I'm at arm's length, fully leaning back as far as I can to keep away from the stink. I'm breathing sporadically to try and not gag. His hair was thick and coarse and greasy. You ever leave lunch meat in the fridge for too long and look at it and it has a slime over it? That's what it was like touching his hair. So I make it through the cut and of course he's being difficult at the end, making me take it shorter and shorter until I got to a point where I think I used a guard and just buzzed his head. I clean him up and he stands up and the seat is just sweat stained, like thick coated in booty sweat. But not like normal sweat, it's like sticky and glossy looking. So they leave and I tell my teacher I need some Lysol to wipe my station down. And at this point I can feel hair grease all over my body, my hands, arms, face. I feel like it was in my pores. I washed my hands and got a new cape and pretty much wanted to light myself on fire to feel clean. It sucked and I told them I'd never do that guy again even if they gave me a 0 for the cut. There were some nasty ones but that was the worst. In cosmetology school we used to do a program where homeless and shelter people could come in for free services. I thought the program was fantastic if they wanted a haircut or shave, etc. Unfortunately a lot of these people would take advantage of it and get unnecessary services because they were free. One of my worst nightmares was a teenage boy whose mom made him come in for the afternoon to get whatever he wanted. So he got a haircut, okay. Then he wanted a shave. Also okay. Then a manicure. They're kind of unnecessary. Then a pedicure. His feet were disgusting. I don't think his socks were washed in a month. and then he insisted we do French polish on them. It was awful. Then he decided he wanted a facial and a back facial. OMG, I am going to die at this point. And I can't turn him down because that's policy at the school. So this kid had the worst acne in the world, and here I am just massaging his face, and then back, and it felt like Crater Town. And while giving the facial he kept his eyes open and was smiling the whole time while staring at me. It was the worst 4 hours of my entire life to deal with this kid. Then when his mom comes to pick him up, she actually said to me, "Oh, you gave him a facial. You should have popped some of those pimples he had." Oh no thank you. Alrighty, I am officially done with this thread. Pizza guys, girls, does your shop have a no delivery list? What houses are on it and why? We had a guy and 2 girls order separately, then grab the pizzas and run. The girls had picked the food up and left, while the guy was paying. After 30 seconds the guy bolted. It was a $100 order. My manager, who is a frequent gym goer, leapt the counter and gave chase. The 2 girls had gotten into a car with the food, but when they saw my manager they drove off leaving the guy. My manager chased him 3 blocks and was gaining on the guy when the girls pulled up and the guy got into the car. Unfortunately, all 3 of them went to school with a kitchen hand at the store, so we had names, jobs, addresses, and Facebook accounts. We contacted them all on Facebook and got them to pay for the pizzas the next morning under threat of contacting police. We also put them on the no delivery list. I'm imaging Arnold Schwarzenegger chasing Jonah Hill around and I'm laughing. Tie. I delivered for a while in college, and there was 2 we don't deliver their neighborhoods. The manager actually allowed it to be driver's choice, but pretty much everyone said no. I actually had a friend who grew up in one of these neighborhoods and I knew it wasn't just drug dealing murdering psychopath running rampant, so I said yes, and I delivered to these neighborhoods. One time I was delivering to an apartment that was part of a triplex or quadplex and some kid outside, probably like 5 or 6 years old, stuck his finger at me and said, "This is a robbery. Give me your money." I just chuckled and kept walking. While I was giving the person their pizza I heard from behind me, "The heck do you think you're doing? Boy, don't you know he the only one who deliver here?" Then as I was walking back to my car he was standing on the sidewalk, mom several feet behind him, and he said, "I'm sorry. It's really cool that she realized you were the only person willing to deliver there and corrected her kid." Okay, we had a really nasty apartment complex in one area of Sacramento. Totally a no. One night a new guy took an order and actually accepted one from there. I was about to call back and say no. I was assistant manager at the time, but running pizzas that day, when in come 2 cops to pick up their pizza. They listen in and offer to tag along. I was dumb and crazy then, so we made the pizza and I loaded into my little truck and drove out there. As soon as we pull into the parking lot, the cop turns off all his lights and coasts into the spot next to mine. I walk up, start the spiel, and start listening to their story of this guy or that guy ordered it. I started to walk away and one of the shady dudes steps out of the bushes next to me, where he'd been hiding. Instantly, every light came on the cop car. Flashes, both spotlights pointing right at me. The cops getting out of the car. Fast. Dude steps way back. I walk back to my car, and a couple cops got an extra free pizza that night, and I got a great story. When I worked at a pizza place, we just had one person that we wouldn't deliver to because he would always refuse to pay and hassle the delivery guy, saying the pizza was cold, took too long, wasn't the right order, whatever. He probably got a couple free pizzas at least before we stopped bothering sending him anymore. I used to deliver sandwiches for a shop. We had to blacklist this one lady who would call up last minute and demand 5,100 sandwiches for her meetings and she wanted them delivered in 15 minutes. We explained things to her over and over again that this was not how it worked, but she still demanded her order. So, when it showed up 45 minutes later than expected, she became a monster, causing a scene, not tipping, sending in complaints to the district manager, etc. This happened so many times, and finally, one day, she called in an order for 200 sandwiches, wanted it in 15 minutes. I delivered it myself and she took the sandwiches from me for her meeting. I sat there and waited for her to sign the receipt, and waited, and waited. Turns out, She took the sandwiches into her meeting and booked the heck out of there, not signing the receipt. She then called her bank to cancel the charge on her card and called us in for fraud. She had the nerve to call up our district manager and said that we owed this to her since all of her orders were late. She was blacklisted after that, and my district manager finally apologized for not believing me on this story. Drug reps are the worst. I probably would have followed her inside for that signature. I worked at a Little Caesars when I was a teenager. On a really snowy night, one of our drivers got into a car accident and sadly lost his life on his way to deliver the pizza. The customer called in a little while after we learned about the accident and absolutely lost his crap that his pizza hadn't been delivered. When the manager explained the situation, he stated he did not give a frick and wanted his pizza delivered for free. Needless to say, he got an earful from my manager and then was put onto a no-serve list. Apparently our entire complex is on the do not deliver after dark list at a local pizza place. That was encouraging to find out a week after moving in. That sounds like a good way to vet a new apartment complex. Call local delivery and see if they go to that address at night. Our delivery store has a woman who used to come in every so often, or order delivery, who did not want black people to interact with her or her food at all. One of our drivers, a really nice old black dude, delivered to her, and she simply slammed the door in his face. Another time, she walked out on a black cashier because she swapped places with the white driver who was originally taking her carry-out order. Finally, the manager put his foot down and told her not to come back or order from us ever again. Ugh. I am on the no delivery list of 2 restaurants because my roommate is a freaking idiot and can't math to save his life. He once sent a driver away after a heated conversation with a 25-cent tip. Unfortunately, I was in the shower at the time. It wasn't until afterwards that he was explaining the situation to me that I realized what a moron he was. The bill came to $20.25. He gave the guy $20 and thought it was a good tip because we ordered 2 sandwiches that were basically $7 a piece and a $1 soda for a total of $15, so $5 tip. In actuality, the sandwiches were $7.99 and the soda was $1.99, so $18 right there. Then there was a $2.25 delivery fee, so $20.25. Unfortunately, the delivery guy spoke almost zero English, so all he could say was not enough to my roommate, and my roommate is an ashat who wouldn't read the damned receipt. He is no longer allowed to answer our door. I used to be a delivery driver for Pizza Hut. I used to work the Sunday afternoon shifts and would have the same man order a supreme pizza every week. I was always the one to deliver his order because most of the time I was the only driver on duty at that time of day. Alan was a nice, quiet man who had a lovely front porch. One day, I didn't take his delivery for some reason. Poor Marvin took the delivery instead on the day that Alan decides to open the door stark naked. Alan wanted to show me, a small red-headed girl, the goods, not big black Marvin. Alan never got another delivery. Haha, that's awesome. I used to deliver Meals on Wheels and it's amazing how many guys would try to pull crap like this. Yes, I worked for a pizza place in high school. One of my friends was killed during a delivery. Apparently, the husband had been in trouble before for domestic violence or something. I heard stories about the wife answering the door with fresh blood on her face, black eyes, that sort of thing. A couple other guys actually called the cops after delivering their pizza. Anyways, my friend shows up to deliver the pizza and I guess the husband thought he had called the police a few nights before. The husband shot and killed my friend. There was an older man who suffered from dementia that would order 4 fountain drinks and nothing else from my shop, then would tip about $300 every time. After hearing about it a couple times, I told my manager, and we all agreed to get in contact with his family, let them know we wouldn't take orders from him, and that they'd have to take some measures to keep him from doing the same with other establishments. God only knows how much money that guy gave away. That was kind of you. A lot of other people would have kept taking advantage of that situation. Don't work there anymore, but we had a nasty 50-plus-year-old woman that would always answer the door naked who was blacklisted, and a 5-block area we wouldn't deliver to because it was the ghetto capital of our city and people had been robbed. I delivered pizza in NJ. I went on the porch to see a snarling Rottweiler behind the door. Not a big deal. Happens a lot. I'm a stranger, the dog is just being a dog. The lady pushes him back. We do the pizza transaction and as I'm turning to go the lady said, "Oh my god, he's out." The back door was open and the dog was charging around the house about to come on the porch. I quickly opened the door to run inside but the lady screamed no. The really bad one is inside and I see a bigger Rottie just inside the hall, so I stick myself between the screen door and the real door and I'm trapped in an angry dog sandwich. The outside dog bites my calf because I can only close the screen door so much. Not much damage but I'm bleeding. The manager goes to talk with the lady. It is like 1/8 of a mile from the store or that lazy bastard wouldn't have bothered. And Rotties are penned up out back. As soon as the lady starts talking to him, another small mutt dog zips out the door and bites him on the hand. He made the call on no more pizza for them. I shouldn't laugh, but the really bad one is inside is a brilliant line. We marked off an entire section of town on the big map in the back of our store because there were too many shootings and murders in the area. Some parts of that section we would go to if it was daylight, but wouldn't deliver to after dark. Others we just didn't go to at all. It was such an exciting way to make money during college. Our greedy butt owner refused to develop such a list, even after 2 of our drivers were mugged at the same house. They wouldn't let us avoid neighborhoods, no matter how unsafe, no matter what time of day. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor robberies nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Worked at a Hungry Howie's Pizza in college. They are basically a cheap, discount pizza chain. We had a few stores in a college town. Mine served the local college campus and the areas out west and south. These included the bad parts of town. We had a list of about 10 or so neighborhoods or streets we did not deliver to because drivers had been robbed, one of which was a rather large government housing project. That never went over well when I had to explain it to people. They often bitched me out like it was my idea or called me a xenophobe. We also refused to hire female drivers because of an incident before I was hired. A group of people made multiple fake calls throughout the night to different addresses until the female driver showed up. When she did, they kidnapped her and violated her for days. She lived. The cops spotted the car a couple of days later with 4 of her attackers in it. It was in Florida. Another story. One of our drivers was a kind of crazy homeless guy who had some anger management issues. One time a dude pulled a shotgun on him while he was still in his car. He was having a bad day, so he just grabbed the barrel, pointed it forward and floored the gas pedal. He also used to sunbathe in his white briefs in the nasty parking lot behind the store while laying out on old pizza boxes. Kidnapped and violated. What the frick? In the late 90s I was still living in Detroit and in between desk jobs, so I delivered pizza as a part-time gig. Detroit's neighborhoods have been rough for a few decades now, but the 90s seemed like they were on their own level. I won't say the specific neighborhood, but there were some really rough ones. This one house, though, this house was just in awful shape. I kind of figured this would be bad even as I was driving down the street to get there. Every other house, literally, was either burned out or very obviously abandoned. This one was just crappy looking, but I tried to be optimistic. I walked up to the door, awning kind of drooping over my head, and knocked. Almost instantly, the door cracked open, and all I saw was a dark hand with what looked like a Glock. Leave the pizza and walk away. I complied, obviously, and told my manager that I wouldn't be delivering to that neighborhood anymore. Still stuck around with that job for another 6 months or so, but that was probably the only thing on that level I've seen. We had a few blacklisted numbers addresses. Mostly were for people who wrote bad checks or would constantly complain, return orders, make threats. One address that was on the absolute edge of our delivery area, a business all by itself on the edge of town, got blackballed because people from outside the delivery area would give that address and meet us there. A couple of bad neighborhoods, including one that was literally 6 dilapidated trailers in the middle of a field with a 2-track going back to it, nothing but sickheads with pit bulls and rotties with no leash, were blacklisted too. My house was actually on a no delivery list back when I was a kid. Mom ordered pizza. Parents took some. By the time the pizza guy came by, my mother and father were so out of it, They couldn't pay the pizza guy. He waited for 40 minutes. Us kids had to apologize to him because we couldn't pay him ourselves. A very embarrassing moment to have when you're 10 years old. Anyways, we couldn't order from that pizza place for the rest of its existence. No child deserves to grow up without pizza. One time I worked for this lady that owned Narden's Pizza in Atascadero, CA. She was the worst person ever. No one ever worked there longer than a couple months, and she just crap on everybody. She didn't have a no delivery list, but what she did have that was even worse was her own personal whitelist delivery book that had every single good tipper in the world on it. Example, delivery boy gets back and goes, "Well, that guy tipped me $20. Owner then writes down that order name number in her book. Next time that guy calls to order a pizza, she doesn't let anyone else deliver. She takes the delivery. No one knew this trick, and she just kept taking orders from all the newbies. I worked there for about 4 months and caught on after the first month or so. After that I spent the next few months claiming that the horrible tippers were amazing tippers. I would watch her go to these repeat customers and come back with a disgusted look on her face. I would ask her what's wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it. TLDR. Pizza owner would write down all the big tippers. She would only deliver to them, not share tips or nothing. I eventually started claiming the people that tipped horrible to be amazing tippers. Hilarity ensued. This needs to go in our Peter Avengers a standalone post. My house got put on the deliver first sort of list because we ordered so much and so often. Eventually, they would know people's phone numbers and knew the address automatically and sometimes give us a discount. It's not official, but there's a house in my area that times you for your tip, which we would be pretty p about normally, but he's a good sport about it, and an average run over there will get you about $7, so we always book it over there first if we're taking more than one at a time. Worked at Papa John's. The only place on the no delivery list were bounced checks. We had one driver get his knee bashed sideways with a baseball bat and money stolen. I delivered to the same place the next night. They didn't care about getting robbed because the driver is only supposed to have $25 max on him all times. So everything over that $25 the driver had to pay for. This driver I think had to pay around $125 after being assaulted. I wanted to clarify about carrying cash. We were told, for this very reason, that after every delivery, usual 2-3 houses, when you come back to the store you put all money in your drop box. Obviously if you got $60 cash on a delivery, the store wouldn't make you pay for that, but they had a record of how much the order was and how they paid. Delivered pizza in high school. Living in NY, there was a couple neighborhoods that we had to be escorted by police who were permanently stationed on the corners there. When you got to the building we had to wait in the security booth that had bulletproof glass. This was all because people would call delivery places and just rob the people of the money they would carry. Sometimes the cars too. Yo, I am hungry and need money, order some pizza. That's a wicked 2 for 1. Prior to my freshman year of college, 2002, I was delivering pizzas for Pizza the Hut in a decent suburb outside of Cleveland. I was the typical stoner partier easygoing delivery guy. As a little background, one afternoon my manager requested I go change several $100s for smaller bills for our register. As I'm leaving the bank after getting change and getting into my car, I sense someone approach from behind and suspect they are going to ask me for a cig. Nope. Instead it's a dude with pantyhose and his head and a knife and demands the money I have in my pocket and my keys. I oblige and he ultimately runs off and tosses my keys in the parking lot where I can see. When I run into the bank, no one at all saw the incident, and wouldn't you know when they pull the footage there is Sungler in the exact spot on the window where my car was parked. The cops interrogate me and search the car, but seem to conclude that in fact I was telling the truth. My manager even vouched for me, saying how I was a good kid. Flash forward to about 10 years and I'm telling the story at a party and bam, it hits me. My manager, who often dated unsavory characters, set up the whole thing. Considering I was robbed in front of a bank in broad daylight on the busiest street in my town, who the heck would know to rob me, especially since I hadn't put my car topper on at this point. That's fricked up. I delivered to the dorms when I was in college. Back before credit cards could be used to pay for pizza, in the largest men's dorm, we had a war with some of the residents after they got pee when we wouldn't accept an expired coupon for a 14 pizza order. So they kept calling us up with ghost orders and making life heck for us over the course of a few weeks. So we stopped delivering to anyone in that dorm, as we were the cheapest pizza in town. That did not go over well with them. The Ras got every student in that dorm together and told them to knock it the frick off or get kicked out. So we tried to deliver again and the same crap happened. So we banned that dorm forever. It was cool by me because those idiots would place 5 pizza orders and tip $2. It was the mid-80s and there was no caller ID. Most of the students used the wall of pay phones we had in the lobby, but some rooms had their own phone. Regardless, there was no way of knowing who was calling. No one deserves to be deprived of pizza, except those guys. Such buttholes. A co-worker and friend of mine got a delivery one night. Before he left, our manager pulled him into the office, gave him a pair of latex gloves and instructed him to use them to put the money in an envelope. He was confused but didn't ask many questions. He says when he got to the house, there was actual caution tape around the yard and a sign that said something like warning, infestation. He is somewhat of a germaphobe to begin with, so at this point he really does not want to go up to the door, but he has to deliver this pizza. The woman who answers the door is grotesque and is covered in red splotches and potentially bites of some kind. He quickly hands her the pizza, carefully takes her money with the gloves on and stuffs it in the envelope, and sprints back to his car. He threw a fit when he got back to the store, and the manager felt so bad she put the house on the blacklist. He said he scrubbed his hands till they were red afterwards. Thinks it was bedbugs or scabies or something. We'll never know. That is a horrible situation. But looking at it from the woman's point of view, she can't leave to get her own food, and she had the decency to warn the store when she called. I had a roommate that ordered from one of my favorite Chinese places around. He ordered then fell asleep. Pee them off hard. They wouldn't deliver to me anymore, so I had to go into the restaurant, speak with the owner, and beg to get him to deliver to me anymore. I had a code word that they knew, and if I didn't give that code word, no delivery. My roommate was a piece of crap and stole all my pots and pans when he moved out. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.